Chapter 6. Matthew looked on in disgust at the people who walked around the town square, carelessly stepping over the dark-stained cobblestones. A town founded on blood. How quaint. He looked up to find the sun had risen enough to dispel the remaining orangish-red glow of sunrise from the land. Matthew loved the early mornings, but there was something about this place that had a way of making the daylight just as formidable as the night that had preceded it. He looked out from between the small shops and the towering clock tower that was honored with the classification of town. A small fishing dock was a hubbub of activity as fishermen tied up their boats and unloaded fishing gear. Considering how dead the rest of the town seemed to be, that was the place where his investigation would begin. Glancing down at the brown stains on the cobblestones, he shuddered. This place really was dead inside, wasn't it? 5 small boats had tied up by the time Matthew arrived. Tough-looking men wandered about the boats, their expressions dark and foreboding. Matthew could sense a sea storm brewing in spite of the serene waters that laid innocent and placid as if sleepy in their morning awakening. Not one to jump in to the action, he hung back and observed the men for a while. He immediately recognized the owner of the first boat to be a tall, heavily bearded, red-haired man. His crew obeyed his orders without question, their shoulders hunched forward and their faces communicating silent fear. The second boat was already deserted, and Matthew figured the crew had tied up several hours ago, not bothering to wait for morning. That could only mean one of 2 things, a really good catch or little to no catch at all. Judging from the expressions of the men present, he assumed it was the latter of the 2. That was when he saw her. Her black hair hung around her face in tangles, mocking the pale alabaster of her skin. She swayed unsteadily, and a man in a tattered shirt with shoulder-length brown hair held her arm to keep her steady. She giggled as she hoisted herself over the side of the boat and struggled to keep her balance. "I'm gonna go home, Sam." Her words were slightly slurred in their pronunciation, but she vehemently declined the man's offer to escort her home. "The men need you to tell them what to do. Oh, just look at the poor souls, lost without their captain." This was Sam's ship, then. Interesting. The girl walked toward the center of town, and Matthew followed her from a distance. The town had begun to wake up, and she hesitated in front of a building that was labeled Rosin's Diner and Bar before turning away toward the town square. She stopped about halfway through and stared at the crowd, oblivious to the people who began milling about her. Matthew observed her profile and noted the tear that glistened on her cheek before dripping onto the stones below. He stepped closer to her and whispered under his breath, "Phoebe?" She looked up quickly at him, light blue eyes wide with fear. "Malachi?" She looked at him closely. Oh, never mind." She shook her head. "I thought you were someone else." Matthew did not respond, but instead looked steadily into her eyes before saying it again. Just one name, and yet it carried so many memories, so much time, so much heartbreak, so much hope. Phoebe? No, I'm Rita." "What is happening here?" Matthew turned and saw the man called Sam looking back and forth between the 2 of them. His expression was cold and threatening when directed towards Matthew, but softened considerably in Rita's presence. "Rita, is he bothering you?" "No," Rita yawned. "He just had me confused with someone else." The 2 men continued to glare at each other until Rita threw her hands in a posture of submission. "Okay, I do not know what is going on here, but I need sleep. Good night, boys." Neither man responded as she walked away, her slight figure swallowed up by the crowd. "Who is she?" Matthew asked sharply. "Who are you, and what do you want with Rita?" "That is Rita, then." "You're not answering my question." "No," Matthew sighed, "but you answered mine. Good day, Sam." Matthew turned to go, but Sam grabbed him by the arm. "See these houses? These people?" he hissed. "All I have to do is yell out that you are a Highland sympathizer and you will be reported." "Is that what happened to Malachi?" Matthew saw Sam's eyes shift to the ground before he mumbled a response. It was something like that." "Why?" "I will report you myself if you do not stay away from Rita." Sam's gray eyes were as unyielding as stone when he looked back at Matthew. "That would be very inconvenient for me if you did." Matthew sighed. "Tell me, Sam, do you all really distrust each other so much that you report people for something as simple as imagining a better life in the mountains?" "No," Sam quipped. "I do not trust you." "So it is just me, then?" Matthew swept the square with his eyes, indicating all of the dark stains it contained. Now it was Sam's turn to sigh. "Just tell me you mean Rita no harm, and we can call this over. I watched you follow her from the docks. Is it really because you confused her with someone else?" "No." Matthew hesitates for a moment before finally saying, "It is because I think she is someone else." Darkness. It blotted out all color, leaving senseless wondering in its wake. It did not spread, it swallowed, as if consuming all landscape in its path and leaving desolation in its place. He loved the difference vanishing the lights could make. The whole world changes with the blowing of a candle or the final dip of the sun. It was beautiful. His kind of art. Adrian stood in darkness now. The sun had set hours ago, and he was excited to see the lunar eclipse. It was his favorite. He had a good view of it from the town square. The whole thing had an irony that was rather pleasant to him. The single flickering street lamp had burned out just moments ago, as if in anticipation for the great moment. The moment when the moon would appear. He could hardly wait. It always made him feel stronger, almost powerful, when the shadow of the earth dimmed the moon's surface, churning it in a shade of rusty orange, the color of blood. He inhaled deeply at the sound of footfalls coming towards him. "Hello, Adrian." As if the universe had conspired to destroy the mood, the street lamp flickered back on again, revealing his visitor. "I had a feeling you would be here, Matthew." Adrian's voice was menacing and low. "What do you want?" "You know what I want." "Let me see." Adrian steadied his long, dark nails. "A bouquet of flowers, a bright rainbow, warm hugs, and oh, that's it." Adrian looked up with a mischievous smile. "A girl, a blonde-haired young woman who allegedly belongs in the Highlands, or is her hair black? It's so hard to keep track of it these days." "Adrian?" Matthew glared at him angrily. "What are you planning?" "To tell you would not be a part of my plan." Adrian grinned savagely before adding, "But then again, maybe it is." "You disgust me." "Come now, Matthew, let's play nice." Adrian chuckled. "You answer a question of mine, and I will answer a question of yours." When Matthew did not answer, Adrian continued, "Do you enjoy being the prince's errand boy, or is it something you do out of some sort of twisted sense of loyalty?" "Do not speak to me of loyalty, Adrian." Matthew's gaze went cold. "We both know who you are and what you have done." "And yet you still have no idea what I'm going to do, Matthew." It scares you, doesn't it? "It would put my mind at ease to have a better idea of what is happening here." "I want something, Matthew. Something I have always wanted, and that lovely little family you serve stole and withheld from me." Adrian's features went dark, as if he was reliving painful memories. "You want power, Adrian, a power that is unlawful for any one being to possess, and you resort to an unmentionable darkness to receive it." "Is my affinity for blood repulsive to you, Matthew?" "Repulsive is a kind way of putting it." Then Adrian laughed. His laugh echoed around the square, and although the hairs on the back of his neck rose at the eerie sound, Matthew stood his ground without flinching. "There is only one thing I want more than power, Matthew. I want revenge. The end result of my plan should result in my receiving both." Adrian was serious now. "I have already received quite a bit of satisfaction from the dear lovesick puppy of a prince you call your friend. He even came to visit me. Imagine that." Adrian smiled to himself. "I wanted him to suffer. These last 3 years have granted my wish." "Then why give him hope? Why tell him she is alive?" "Is that all he told you?" Adrian questioned, a fox-like gleam in his dark eyes. "No, I suppose it isn't. I want his blood, Matthew. You are an intelligent man and can figure out the rest. You want to kill him and use the power to overthrow King Don. If Elikai dies, do you really think that King Don will need to be overthrown?" Matthew remained silent. "I'm not going to kill you, though, Matthew. Without the two of them, your life will lack purpose. That is enough punishment for you." "You are so sure of yourself." Matthew tilted his head to the side. "Have you thought of all the ways it could possibly go wrong?" You're bluffing. Adrian placed a cold hand on Matthew's shoulder. I appreciate the effort, but desperation is a bad look on you. If you don't mind, I have an eclipse to enjoy. Adrian watched Matthew leave the square and shook his head. They were underestimating him. Always had. He was going to change that. They would be so sorry, and he couldn't wait. Until that day came, he would be content with rehearsing his glorious plans to himself underneath the light of a full moon the color of blood.